All right, let's dive into Shilajit. We've had tons of questions about this stuff, and we're going to unpack a WebMD article about it today. We'll cover everything from what it is to how it's used. So, are you ready to get into it?
Absolutely. It's definitely something that's been getting more and more attention lately.
Okay, so first things first, for those of us who are totally new to this, what exactly is Shilajit? The article describes it as this kind of sticky substance found in mountain ranges?
Yes, so picture this high in the Himalayas. You've got this dark, almost tar-like resin oozing out from cracks in the rocks. It's formed over centuries, from decomposed plants and animal matter, all mixed up with minerals.
Okay, so we're talking about something that forms over centuries from, like, the essence of mountains. That's pretty incredible. But what makes it so special? What makes it stand out from, just plain old rocks?
It's all about the ingredients, right? So aside from those minerals, it's got things like fulvic acid and humic acid. Those are organic acids that are thought to have all kinds of benefits. And here's where it gets really interesting. Shilajit also has essential fatty acids and amino acids.
Wait, hold on. Essential fatty acids and amino acids, like the building blocks of protein? I definitely wasn't expecting to find that in something oozing out of rocks.
Right. It's a pretty wild combo. And it might explain why Shilajit has been used in traditional medicine for, well, a really long time. But now it's getting more popular in modern wellness, too, with all the talk about adaptogens and antioxidants.
Ah, yes. Adaptogens. I feel like I'm hearing about those everywhere these days.
They're basically substances that help your body deal with stress better, any kind of stress, really. Physical, chemical, even emotional stress.
So they help your body build up resilience, like a buffer against, the craziness of modern life.
Exactly. And then alongside that, you've got the antioxidant effect. Shilajit is supposed to help fight those free radicals, those unstable molecules that can damage cells and contribute to aging.
So it's like a two-for-one deal, helping with both stress and those free radicals.
Possibly, but we need a lot more research to say for sure. One thing the WebMD article points out is the difference between processed Shilajit and what they call crude or unprocessed Shilajit. That seems to be a pretty key distinction.
Ah, so there are different types. What's the difference exactly?
So processed Shilajit has gone through steps to remove impurities and anything that might be harmful. It's the type that's generally recommended and the kind that has been studied for safety. But unprocessed Shilajit, well, that's basically straight from the source. And we don't have enough data yet to know if it's safe or what the risks might be.
Makes sense. Kind of like the difference between, say, foraging for wild mushrooms versus getting them from a grocery store, right? You want to be sure about what you're consuming.
Exactly. Now, the WebMD article lists a ton of traditional uses for Shilajit, but it also says there's not a lot of scientific evidence to back up a lot of these claims yet.
Oh, bummer. So what about all those claims that Shilajit helps with things like Alzheimer's, athletic performance, even male infertility? Is there any truth to those?
Well, just because something has been used in traditional medicine for a long time doesn't mean it's automatically scientifically valid. We need those solid clinical trials to confirm anything. There is some promising early research. For example, some studies suggest Shilajit might help with cognitive function. But we're a long way from conclusive evidence.
So it sounds like we need to take those claims with a grain of salt for now and look for that research-backed evidence.
Absolutely. And remember, even with promising research, it's crucial to talk to your doctor before you add Shilajit to your routine, especially if you have any other health conditions. They can help you figure out if it's right for you and advise on dosage.
Speaking of dosage, the WebMD article mentioned some specific dosages they've studied, right? Something like 2 grams daily for 45 days or 500 milligrams daily for 48 weeks.
Yeah, those are some of the dosages that have been researched. But of course, it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. Your doctor can help determine what's best for you, taking into account your health history and any medications you might be taking.
Right, it's not just something to jump into without doing your homework. It seems like taking Shilajit is a decision that requires some careful thought and expert advice.
Definitely. Now, even though the scientific evidence is still kind of limited for some of those traditional claims, it's important to remember that Shilajit has been used for centuries in Ayurveda.
Yeah, that historical aspect is fascinating. Can you tell us a bit more about how it's been used traditionally?
Well, Ayurvedic medicine has this incredible history, right?
Yeah.
And Shilajit is considered a super valuable substance in Ayurveda. It's been used for all sorts of things, from boosting energy and longevity to supporting brain function, even helping with altitude sickness.
Wow, altitude sickness. I hadn't heard that one before. It makes you wonder, given that it comes from the mountains, if there's a connection there.
Right. It's amazing how much we're still learning about this stuff.
This deep dive is already turning out to be more complex and interesting than I thought. We've covered what Shilajit is, the potential benefits, the risks, and even its history. But it feels like we've only just scratched the surface.
We definitely have. There's still so much more to explore. Like, how does Shilajit potentially interact with other medications?
Great point. And what about the quality and sourcing of Shilajit? We talked about how important it is to choose the processed kind, but are there other things to consider when it comes to quality?
Definitely. We'll get into those questions and more when we continue our deep dive.
Sounds like we have a lot more to unpack. Stay tuned, everyone. We'll be right back with more on Shilajit and what you need to know. So before the break, we were talking about how Shilajit has been used traditionally to help with altitude sickness, which, considering it comes from the mountains, is kind of poetic, don't you think?
Yeah, it really is. It kind of shows you how long traditional medicine systems have been observing and experimenting. People notice that connection between this substance found high up in the mountains and its potential to help with the challenges of actually being in that environment.
That's so fascinating. It makes you think about how many other connections are out there just waiting to be discovered, maybe even in modern medicine. But speaking of connections, you mentioned potential interactions between Shilajit and other medications. What should we be aware of?
The WebMD article specifically calls out a possible interaction with diabetes meds. It seems Shilajit might make those medications work even stronger, which could lead to, you know, dangerously low blood sugar.
So anyone who's managing diabetes should definitely talk to their doctor before even thinking about trying Shilajit. It sounds like that interaction could be serious.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's never a good idea to take risks when you're managing a chronic condition. Your doctor can help you weigh the potential benefits against the risks and adjust your treatment plan.
Good advice. Now, what about heavy metals in Shilajit? I know that's a big concern with supplements these days.
It's a valid concern, for sure, especially with the unprocessed kind. Remember, Shilajit forms over such a long period, and it's absorbing minerals from its surroundings. Heavy metals can definitely be part of that mix, and they can be toxic.
So it's like Shilajit reflects the environment it comes from.
Exactly.
Hmm.
That's why where it comes from and how it's processed are super important. Choosing processed Shilajit from a reputable brand that does testing for contaminants, that's key.
That makes sense. It's like you're reducing the risk by going with something that's been carefully checked out. But how can we know if a brand is actually reputable? What should we be looking for?
That's a great question. Look for certifications from those independent third-party labs. The ones that test for heavy metals, pesticides, and other impurities. They make sure the product meets certain safety standards. Transparency is key. A good company should be totally open about how they do their testing.
So we should do some research before just hitting that add to cart button, check for those certifications, maybe even contact the company if we have questions. Being an informed consumer is super important when it comes to Shilajit, it seems.
It really is. Don't just go for the cheapest option or fall for the marketing hype. Take your time to find a brand you really trust.
You mentioned before that Shilajit contains fulvic and humic acids and that those are supposed to be beneficial. Can you explain that a bit more? What do those acids actually do?
So fulvic and humic acids, they're these complex organic molecules that are really important for soil health. Think of them as the end products of all that decomposition of plants and animal matter. And in Shilajit, they're thought to be a big part of its antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties.
So they're like the good guys in the soil, helping plants grow strong, and maybe doing the same for us when we consume Shilajit.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. There's a lot of research happening on the potential benefits of fulvic and humic acids.
Yeah.
But we still need more to really understand how they work in the human body.
It feels like with Shilajit, every time we peel back a layer, there's another one underneath.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so interesting. It's like this tiny example of how connected the natural world is. And we're just starting to understand how it might benefit our health.
We've talked a lot about the potential benefits, but let's get back to the risks for a minute. WebMD mentioned possible side effects, and we've talked about heavy metals and the interaction with diabetes medications. Anything else we should be aware of?
Well, some people might experience some mild stomach issues when they first start taking Shilajit. Things like nausea, an upset stomach, maybe even diarrhea. Starting with a smaller dose and increasing it gradually can help with that.
So ease into it instead of taking a big dose right away.
Yeah, exactly. Gives your body a chance to adjust. And of course, if you have any side effects that stick around or get worse, stop taking it and talk to your doctor.
Makes sense. It's always important to pay attention to your body and not ignore any warning signs. We've said it before, but it's worth repeating. Working with a healthcare professional is really important here.
I can't stress that enough, especially if you have any health conditions already or are taking other medications. Shilajit is a powerful substance, and it's not something to mess around with on your own.
We've talked a lot about the science behind Shilajit, the potential benefits, the risks, the need for more research. But I'm curious about what it actually feels like to take it. What's the experience like?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, the WebMD article doesn't really get into the subjective experience of taking Shilajit. But, anecdotally, some people say they feel more energized, more focused, even a bit happier.
So there might be a subjective element to it beyond just the physical effects.
It seems that way, but it's important to remember that everyone's different, and what works for one person might not work for another. It just highlights, again, how important it is to get personalized advice from a healthcare professional.
This deep dive is really showing me how complex Shilajit is. It's not just some weird goo from the mountains. It's a substance that deserves respect and careful consideration.
I agree. It's a great example of how nature can give us these powerful tools for our health. But it's on us to use them wisely and responsibly.
Well said. So we talked about the potential interactions with diabetes meds, but what about other medications? The article mentioned a possible interaction with blood thinners. What's the issue there? So Shilajit and blood thinners, that sounds a bit risky.
Yeah, it's definitely something to be careful with.
Right.
Like we were saying, Shilajit itself seems to have some blood thinning effects, though mild.
Mhm.
So if you're already taking a prescribed blood thinner, taking Shilajit at the same time, well, it could potentially increase your risk of bleeding.
It's not just about whether Shilajit is safe by itself, it's also about how it might interact with other things you're taking. Even over-the-counter stuff, right?
Exactly. It's about looking at the whole picture of your health and understanding how different things you put in your body might affect each other.
That's a really important point. So again, it seems like talking to your doctor before trying Shilajit is absolutely essential. They can help you figure out if it's safe for you given your individual situation.
Absolutely. It's about making informed decisions and having a healthcare professional on your side who understands your health history.
We've talked a lot about how important it is to choose processed Shilajit over unprocessed. It seems like that's the key takeaway for safety. But are there other things to think about when it comes to the quality of Shilajit? Beyond just the processing, I mean?
Oh, definitely. Even when you're looking at processed Shilajit, the quality can vary a lot. It all depends on where it's sourced from, the methods used to extract it, and how much quality control is in place.
So it's not enough to just check the label and see that it says processed. There's more to it than that.
Exactly. You really want to look for brands that are upfront about their sourcing and manufacturing processes. Ideally, they should be sourcing Shilajit from, really clean environments, and they should be using sustainable harvesting practices, and of course, rigorous testing at every stage.
It sounds like finding good quality Shilajit is a real detective job.
It can be, but trust me, it's worth the effort. You want to make sure you're getting something safe and effective. I mean, you're putting this into your body. So quality should be at the top of your list.
This deep dive has been amazing. It's made me realize that there's so much more to Shilajit than I initially thought. It's not just some mysterious goo from the mountains. It has this incredible history, and there's all this fascinating science behind it. It has a lot of potential, but there are also some serious things to consider before you just start taking it.
Couldn't agree more. It really shows the power of nature, but it also shows how important it is to approach natural remedies thoughtfully. We need to respect their potential, but we also need to do our research and make informed decisions.
Well said. For anyone listening who's feeling as intrigued by Shilajit as we are after this deep dive, keep exploring. There's so much information out there. Just remember, talk to your doctor before trying anything new, especially if you have any health conditions or are taking medications.
And remember, be an informed consumer. Do your research, find a brand you trust, and listen to what your body's telling you.
Great advice. That wraps up our deep dive into Shilajit. We hope you found it informative and got you thinking. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a fascinating topic. Until then, stay curious.